Hi, everyone. My name is Sufyan Abbasi.
Hi. Hello? Hello. OK. Hi, my name is Jorge Garcia.
And we are here to present Earth Engine user interfaces and apps, how to build awesome UI in Earth Engine. Just to introduce ourselves, we're both on the front-end team, and so we're kind of responsible for building the code editor and Earth Engine apps and those kind of things. OK, so we're about to start. But first, let's do the lightning talk version of this. How to build a user interface in 6 easy steps. OK, step 1. Figure out what you want your users to be able to do. So like, OK, my deforestation detector app will allow users to click on the map and then show a chart, and then maybe maybe a slider to like mask out some values. So just think about in words. What do you want your user to do with your app? Step 2. Draw a sketch of how you want the app to look. So I usually like to use slides, and so I'll just like draw some boxes, maybe some like filler text, and just kind of get a feel of like what the layout's going to be like. And then 3, identify the interactions of the app. So so when the user clicks here on the map, I'm going to update this chart over here. Step 4 is to like structure your app code to kind of capture those interactions. So like, OK, here's my function. It's going to make a chart with the map point, and it's going to return a chart. So OK, cool. So you build these functions. OK, step 5, you're going to find your widgets. You're going to compose them together. You're going to bind some callbacks. You're going to style them. You're going to test them out in the debug. And then finally, you'll get a successful Earth Engine app. So thank you very much. Feedback forms are out there. You can please file out. Yeah. OK, so the goals for this talk is to help fill in step 5 a little bit. We're going to learn about our widgets. You're going to learn about Earth Engine apps as a whole and kind of how to compose Earth Engine apps. And then finally, we're going to learn a little bit about code structure and some of the baseline things you're going to need to want to know to build Earth Engine apps. So just as a logistics, so you can find the resources at our our talk. Actually, here, let me just show you on here. So if you go to like the main summit website, you can find our talk here, Earth Engine. And so you can visit the slides here in the resources, and you can also find the tutorial script repository here. And so, or you can just go to this slide, slide 11 here, logistics. So you can find our example repos, and we'll just kind of go through some of that code there. So and the TAs can help you find those resources. So without further ado, let's talk about Earth Engine apps. So our homepage is earthengine.app, and there you'll be able to find examples apps that kind of exemplify kind of the interactions and kind of apps that you can build. And you can also click in the top right. You can see the source code for the apps as well. And it's just a really nice place to go visit to, hey, how do I just get started? And just to explain more about what is Earth Engine apps. So there are dynamic user interfaces for publishing and sharing Earth Engine analyses. So like your code editor is kind of locked behind a registration and like a sign-in and all that stuff. Earth Engine apps let you publish directly to the web and allows users to actually visit your computation in a nice user interface if you build one. And another cool couple features to call out is that they're dynamic. So if your script is pulling in the latest data, your Earth Engine app is also going to pull in their latest data. And it's also shareable in the sense that you can share the links out, but there's also restricted mode, which let you supply a Google group and say, no, only these people in the Google group can visit this app. So that can also help kind of control. So like, there's a lot of nice use cases. Like, hey, I want to share this app with someone in my team and let them explore who's not really a coder. So really, the point of Earth Engine apps is that when it's like the console is not enough, I know you print everything to the console. I do that too. It's great for debugging. But what you really want to do is you want to put a presentation of your code in a nice little user interface. So this is where user interfaces come in. I just have a three-step guide to publishing an app. Press the apps button. Press new app. You just go through the three dialogue flow and publish. And you can also supply a bunch of other stuff there too. So feel free to explore the documentation on that. So cool. So at the baseline, Earth Engine apps are built from widgets. Widgets are user interface components that allow the user to interact with the app. So there's many different user interface components, things that you use often in the web, and we expose those. And the main idea is when the user interacts with the widget, you're going to supply a function which will run when the user finishes interacting with it that you can go do something else. And we're going to use functions a lot, so we're going to kind of go through that more. So let's go through our widgets library and just kind of get you a feel of what we have. So there are three main types of widgets. The first is widgets that you use to display information. The second is user interface, input parameters that allow the user to interact. And the third one are layout widgets, whose jobs are just to like lay out other widgets, and they let widgets go inside widgets. And it's kind of nice for laying things out in a nice way. So let's start with the first type. So the first type of widget is called UI.label. And UI.label is just for displaying text. So hello. You can also set a URL. So if you want, earthengine.google.com or whatever, you can set the URL to point to somewhere else. There's actually a new feature I wanted to call out, which is called set image URL. And you can input a base64 encoded image string, and it will actually render an image. And so now you can put your nice little logo inside of your app, which is really fun. We can also link out to, I think, cloud storage buckets. So if you have an image in the cloud storage bucket, you can do that. We don't allow you to hit any endpoint for security reasons. So just keep that in mind. There's some restrictions about where you can actually pull images from. So the next type is chart. So charts are charting usually images, image collections, and they usually allow you to kind of, there's some click interactions you can put on them. But yeah, you'll see a lot of charts in your user interfaces. And then there's also thumbnails. And thumbnails actually build a GIF from an image collection. And you can supply a bunch of input parameters, and it will help you build cool thumbnails. And then the thumbnails will be dynamically generated live. So one cool interaction you could do is let the user draw a box or click a point, and you can just have a thumbnail just generate directly from there. So you can kind of build fun little thumbnail generation apps from your code. So it's very fun, very cool tool. So the second type are input parameters. These are just interaction widgets. So the first one is a button, and you know buttons, you click on them often. And you supply an onClick function to do something when you get clicked. So here I was clicked. A new feature, again, is set image URL. And now you can actually make a button an image. So now you can make a little settings icon or kind of play around with fun little buttons instead. So really fun for building more pretty apps. Next is a checkbox. And checkbox have two states, on or off, true or false. So when you supply a function to the onChange callback event, listener, just bear with me on that. It'll return whether it's true or false, right? Is checked is just the parameter that you get. And so yeah, you can kind of use this to maybe toggle on and off a layer, or there's a lot of fun little interactions you can get with the checkbox. A slider lets the user pick a value between 2 points, so 0 and 10, and you can also do floating point values, I think. And so the onChange function again just returns the value. And then a date slider is a similar concept, but lets the user pick a date. So for example, if you wanted to give the user a way to change the date filters on your image collection, then you might use a date slider to say set the start date, set the end date, and then you can say click the button to go and generate the image. So it's really fun to give the user ability to change the dates of the app. A select is a dropdown. So you say what are the items you want to have the user click on, and it will return the name of the item that they clicked on. And so we can actually use dictionaries, and I'll explain that in a bit to make that a little bit easier. So for example, you might say, okay, we have Landsat, we have Sentinel, we have Modus, and pick one from the list, and then we'll output an image. So that's something you could do with that. A text box lets the user just type whatever they want, literally anything, and when the user presses enter, it'll call the callback function and input the text that they put. So yeah, you kind of have to do a little bit of input validation with this one. If you want to say, hey, type a number, it won't just allow the user to just type a number. It will actually let the user type whatever they want. So you need to think a little bit about how to make sure that the thing that they write actually makes sense. But text boxes can be really helpful in letting the user just type in freeform stuff. Okay, the third type of widget are layout widgets. So the first one, is the map. So the default map you get with capital M map is a UI.map. And a UI.map is essentially you can just make as many maps as you want in Earth Engine and you can just use map.addLayer on that map to put layers on the map. And they also have onClick handlers. So for example, hey, user clicked here, go and send an event. Or actually, when the user has dragged or moved the map around, you can also have callbacks for that too. So the map kind of lets you kind of detect when the user is doing things to the map, but then you can also put widgets in the map. So we'll see examples of that. A panel essentially is just a basic container that you can put any widget inside of. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's just a container, a parking spot for any of your widgets. So if here, for example, we have a label, and we have we're going to add the label to the panel, and then we're going to set the layout. So you can have in a panel lets you actually set the the widgets will go in vertically or horizontally, so you can actually kind of change that kind of parameter. So yeah, things like that. I like this example because you can put a map in a panel, and then you can put a panel in that map, and then you can put another map in that panel, and you can just keep putting panels and maps forever, which is really fun. Okay, a split panel is it has a couple modes, which is pretty cool. You pick a first panel and a second panel. An orientation, which you whether want like horizontally, like on top of each other, or vertical. And there's two modes. White mode, which lets you it superimposes both of those things, and you can use a slider to like show and reveal like one or the other. But there's also if you set wipe to false, it'll be resizable, and it lets you kind of just drag the windows. So what I usually do is put like a side panel, like a panel on one side and a map on the other, and let the user like drag. So like if they don't want the panel, they can just move it all the way to the left. So panels essentially are just two panel. You can either put two panels or two maps, or a map and a panel, but you can't put other widgets in there, so just keep that in mind. All right, that's actually all of them. Now we're going to move on to the next part. How do I work with widgets?
All right. First, do we have any questions about the widgets that we covered? No? All right, let's move forward then. I'll take this. All right, so first, some JavaScript. So one really important thing that we're going to need is functions. So if you call a function by its name, it'll execute some code. So here we have the function that returns, hello, my name is plus name, and name is that input that we're providing. So there's an example of the output if we were to call this function with Sufyan in there. And then also, dictionaries are really important. So this is a way to store key value pairs. And you can access those values with the dot notation, which we see there, print image collections.landsat, or bracket notation, which is the next line. And we can also add more key value pairs after we initialize the dictionary. Any question about those? All right, so how do we work with widgets? So here's a basic workflow. So first, we'll make the widget. So here we're making a button, and we're providing that label there that's going to say click me. And next, we add an event listener. So on click, we're going to run this function that says print I was clicked. And then we're going to add this widget to another widget. So here we're going to add it directly to the map. And then we can style it. So here we're going to set the color to red, the text color. And then the position is going to be top right of the map. Here's a more compact form, so you can do it all in one go when you're initializing this button. So we're providing the label, the onClick, and then the styling. And on the right, you can see some more arguments you can pass in. So you could pass in disabled, it's a Boolean, so whether you can interact with it or not, the image URL that we covered. So that's a more compact form of doing that. And here's the result. So we have our button, top right with red coloring. So how do we make these widgets useful? So like we've been talking about, event handling is what's going to make them useful. So by binding an event handler, we can execute some function when the user does something. So here's like a diagram of what's going on here. So we have the button, and it's going to say, when it's clicked, it's going to fire an event. And then the onClick handler is listening for that event. So the button will contact the onClick handler that it was clicked. And once we get that event, we're going to do something. So we're going to change the label to clicked. So then we're going to update the UI, and the button's going to say clicked. So this is kind of how events work. Any questions about that? And here's some event handling patterns. So except for the UI label, each widget has an on-click or an on-change. So buttons have an on-click event handler. The other ones have an on-change. And the on-change, they take in the value and the widget. So for example, here we have the text box. So the value would be whatever the user typed in, and then hit enter. And then the second parameter is the widget itself, which can be useful if you want to change something on the widget. And that is event handling. So how do we make our apps pretty is what we're going to talk about now. So here's some things you can do to style your widgets. I'll talk about padding and margin first, and I have this diagram there because it can be confusing even for me as a front-end engineer to see what's the difference between these two. So padding is like putting space inside the widget, and that's what we see there. So it's those little lines in between. That green would be like, let's say, the button and like its text, and then the padding is space between the button and like the outline of the button. And then margin is space between widgets. So if you have two buttons next to each other, you want to change the space between them, then you'll update that value. And there's a couple ways to like supply that. So let's say for padding, if you just put in 10 pixels, it'll be all around like the button, for example. If you do 10 and 0, then it'll be top, bottom, and then the sides. And then you can do for each side, you can provide a value. So it'll be top, right, bottom, and left. We have the border. You can style the border. Here we have 2 pixels, solid gray. Color will change the font color. Background, the background color. Font weight, we can do bold. We can do lighter. We can do 100, which is the lightest you can go. And then the position, so this will be like followed by bottom or top. And then you can do like right or left or center, top center, bottom center. So those are some of the things you can do to style these widgets. If there's no questions, I'll move forward. Oh, yep.
Does it give a reason that we don't have access to full CSS settings?
Yeah, it's good. That's a super good question, and there's no good reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question is, why don't we have access to all the CSS like attributes?
It's a super good question. There's no good reason why we don't do it. There are a lot of really good CSS properties that we're missing. For example, border radius like changes the bounding corners. Yeah, and CSS is very rich. I think that there's kind of like the more CSS we support, the more intense that people can make their apps. At the same time, it gives more opportunities for things to go wrong if there are too many CSS properties, and we might not be able to control for those. So I think there's just kind of like this balance between wanting to provide the most useful CSS, but not accidentally just exposing the entire CSS like rendering engine to the user, which there are many ways in which you can build some really cool things with CSS and CSS by itself. So sorry, not a good answer, but I think that if there are some CSS properties that you're like, of course you should have this, why don't you have this? Feel free to make a feature request in the bugs list on the top right. We were definitely listening, and I feel you. I was like, why don't we have border radius? It's so simple. I think that's a second question over there. Oh, that's a super good question. So yeah, accessibility question. There's a lot of the basic components that we use. They're kind of like a wrapper behind an underlying component system that we're using. Those do come with accessibility. So when you set the text, so you set the button, we'll make sure to put the area label button on there because that just comes with the component. I can't say that it's the best or most perfect accessible feature. So I think that's something that we are starting to think a little bit more about as we're kind of building better widgets and building a better Earth engine. We want to make sure it's accessible. And the reason being is your Earth engine apps are being shown to the web. And the web is the entire World Wide Web. And we want to make sure they're mobile friendly. And we want to also make sure that they are accessible because we want everyone to be able to use our app. So we try to do as much heavy lifting as we can, but if there are gaps in our accessibility, yeah, again, we love to hear it, and we love to chat about those, and we can try to get this fixed. Mm-hmm. Oh, an alt text. Yeah, you know, I don't know how we deal with alt text. Now that I'll file that as a feature request that you should take the label and make that the alt text to the image. So thanks for catching that. And I need to look into the code to make sure if we're not doing that, that we do that. Thank you. Any other questions on styling? We're going to talk about layouts in a second. Okay, thank you.
All right. So here's two ways that you can style your widgets. So you can do it directly by supplying the style property, and you can do a couple different ones. So here we're doing the height to be 100%. So it's going to go from top to bottom with 30% because we want some space for the map. And or if we're applying this to like a panel, and then position, so bottom right. And there's also the other way to do it is by using .style, .set, and then you can also set individual properties that way.
Can I mention one thing? Those are dynamically styled. So if you have something that you can actually dynamically style things in the app code. So you know, all the CSS is pretty live. So that can be pretty powerful if you're wanting to change the styles on the fly.
All right, so we're going to cover kind of the bread and butter template of putting like panels and maps together in 4 steps. So first, we're going to create a panel, and here we're going to go with layout vertical. And like I was mentioning on the previous slide, we're going to do a width of 30% because we want a majority of the space for the map. But we can make it more adjustable depending on how we set up the slider. And then we're going to add, here we're just adding a widget, so we're adding a label. We didn't really specify what it's going to have, but you can add as many widgets as you want to this panel. Next, we're going to create the map, and we're going to add a legend to it. So here we're creating the map on the first line, and then the legend panel on the second one, which will go inside the map, which we'll add on the last line. And here we're just specifying vertical layout, and also the position will be bottom right, so be at the bottom right of the map. And so we have our panel and our map. To put these together, we're going to use a split panel. And on the first panel, we're going to put the first panel we created on the first slide. And then the second panel will be the map. So that's the layout we chose for here. And you can switch those around if you wanted to. And then lastly, we have to do these 2 lines of code. So UI.root.clear. We're going to do that to get rid of the default map. So we created a new map, so we're no longer going to use the default map. If you want to hack around, you could save the default map and then use it in this split panel. But for simplicity, we made a new map, and we're going to use that one. So we're going to clear to remove that default map, and then we're going to add the split panel to the root. So now it will show our new split panel where the default map would be. And all that's left is the hard part. So as you can see, we have nothing here. We just have a panel that's blank and the map and a legend that says legend. So nothing interesting is going on. So now we're actually going to go through an example and see what we can do. So we're going to try to do the NDVI Explorer, which Sufyan will walk us through. And here is when you click on any point on the map, that chart there will update and show you the NDVI over time. So that's what we're going to try to create right now.
Awesome. Great to take any high-level questions, and before we jump into our coding part, and this is going to be very freeform. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to order which priority to give to each layer to be rendered?
Oh, yes.
To render it ahead and just mask it?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But it's currently visualizing is rendered.
Yes. Good idea. Okay. This is
the question.
Yes, of course. So how do you change the layer rendering priority so that maybe you can like cache a layer and have it render and then like set it when you're ready? So it turns out, so layers, how would I actually live code that for you? Yeah, maybe I will. So you can get, if you do like UI.map, okay, so you have a map, you can do map.layers to get the layers of the map. And you can actually get whichever layer you want. So get 0 gets the first one, get 1, get 2, get 3. So once you get the layer, there's 2 different properties. You can show or hide. It's like set shown, set false. Dot literally it clears everything from the layer. And there's also opacity. And opacity just sets the transparency. So if you use set shown false, then nothing gets pre-rendered. But if you set opacity 0, then the actual tiles will start loading, but they'll be invisible. So what you might want to do is, let's say the user is like setting all properties for the layer, and they press run, and I guess maybe you want to try to pre-rendering the layer, or maybe you want to try to anticipate what the user is going to be doing before they hit enter to show it. What you could do is, as the user is interacting, you can set the layer properties, but then just keep the opacity 0. And then maybe when the user press enter, then set opacity to 1, and then it'll just magically, like, okay, look, see, there's a layer you just created. Does that work, or not quite? Oh, okay, okay, great. We're on the same wavelength here.
The stuff is that, like, for example, the sixth one,
Yeah.
this one is actively at opacity 1.
Ah.
This one of opacity 1 is render first, or this one is on the top.
Oh.
Render first.
Yes. Okay, so
Not like the
yes.
layer that is
Yes, so it turns out you can also rearrange the layers. You probably mess around with that. So if you do map.layers with the function open close parentheses dot set, you can actually set the index. You might want to maybe play around with the index. You can actually change the index layers. I think once you do that and you remove the layer and add the layer back, it'll have to re-render the layer. So yeah, I think really what we need is just a better way to rearrange layers. I just don't think maybe we have all the features that you need, and maybe you just hit the limit of where we are, because yeah, clearly all the suggestions that I give off the top of my head are what you've already tried. So yeah, sorry, maybe there isn't a good solution for you, but maybe come to our office hours and we could try to hack with you. Any more questions? Alrighty, ready to do some live coding, and the one I'm most afraid of. Okay, it's a 1:43, so we have 30 more minutes. Wow, okay, we have 30 whole minutes to do some live coding. Okay, cool. So, okay, again, let's just kind of go through the logistics. So again, go to the Summit website. Click on my presentation, our presentation, or click on this one, tutorial script repository. And we'll just hit view resource, and actually I've already kind of got this sort of open. But what you'll get is, and hopefully this works, is here in your readers section, you will see a new repository show up. And it'll say user Sufi G4G-UI-apps. If you don't see it, press this refresh button. If you then don't see it, you press this browser refresh button. And if you don't see it then, press inspect, hold here, empty cache, and rehard. If you run into that problem, let's flag us down. We will happily, TA will happily try to go through those debugging steps with you, and we can always just try again. Wait like a minute and try again. All right, so let's assume you started with, let's just assume we start with a basic Earth Engine script that doesn't have any user interface, and you're ready to make an app. So this script, it does an NDVI, you know what that is. You add the layer, you set the center. We declare a dot, and here's kind of weird. We actually initialize our own map layer, so now we can like manipulate this one layer. And I just set that one layer to, this is a little bit more advanced, and then finally, I just created a chart out of this NDVI, and then I printed it. So I'm sure many of your apps or many of your scripts look like this. You're just printing stuff to the console, but now you're ready to take it to the next level. You want to build a user interface. So the first thing you got to do, this is script 01, is you're going to convert those operations into functions, because functions are the bread and butter of the way your app is being rendered. And so now you'll see I created a new function called showPointOnMap, which takes a point, and a point is actually defined as like a geometry, an EE geometry, and it does the same thing, set the layers dot. Okay, and then the second function is make a chart. Again, takes in a geometry, point, builds a chart, and prints it. And then I call these two functions at the bottom, because if I don't do that, nothing will show up, because the functions are declared, but we didn't run them. So, oopsies. So run a function. Oh my god, I know how to use a code editor. What is going on? Why is this menu showing up? Who works on this? You run the functions to have them show up. Okay, so build a function for every operation that you want your script to do. Next is script 2 is we are going to try to use event listeners to try to kind of make this interactive. So the event listener that we added is map.onClick. Map.onClick returns a coordinates object, and I'll just go ahead and print. Would you mind holding my mic for me? Thank you so much. This is luxury. So I'm going to interact with the script by printing the object, and you'll notice you get a lat and a lon. So I convert the latitude longitude to an E geometry point, and that is what I use to supply into the function. So you're kind of now seeing that, as I click around, I'm printing out new, and then I call these functions here to just print the new maps. Again, this is kind of silly because we're just printing maps, the charts, but now we got the first event handler in. So now we go to script 3. Now we're going to start adding widgets. So what I did is I like to consolidate all of the widget initialization in one place. So what I do is I like to start with panels, because panels are your parking spot. What I mean by that is you initialize all the panels first, and then you add the widgets that you want to in the panel, and you can just clear out the panel by just doing like panel.clear, and then just re-add them sometimes if you need to. But the panels don't go away. The panels will just stay there. So that's kind of what we end up doing. So start with the panel. Title, I added a title, label. Instructions, just say click on the map. I even created a panel for the chart, because we're going to clear out the chart panel and then put a new chart in there for the new chart. And then I'm going to, again, do the add function. So panel add title, panel add instruction, panel add chart panel, and then we're printing the panel. Again, we're not even putting this on the map yet, but we're just still printing to the console, but we're now printing the panel itself. By the way, you can't print the panel and also put it on the map. You'll get an error. Panels only like to be in one spot at a time. Actually, all the widgets only like to be in one spot at a time, so keep that in mind. Okay, so same functions as before, but this time instead of printing the chart, we're going to clear the chart panel and then add the chart that we just generated. And so when I press run, okay, so we got the panels on the right, but now you'll notice the charts you're not getting new charts every time. We're actually just replacing the charts already there. Again, this is not the most efficient way to do it, in the sense that like you can probably change the data on the chart instead of actually clearing the chart and reading a new one. It's fast enough to just do it. So anyway, this is for simplicity. That's premature optimization is the root of all evil. This is good enough for us. Good enough for me, at least. Okay, so we have our panel. It's time to lay them out on the map. So here, now we're going to actually not use the default map anymore. We're going to use our new map. So we initialize a map using ui.map. And now instead of using capital M map, we're using this lowercase map that we defined here. This code is a little small, isn't it? Okay. Yes, so now we're just using the new map, not the old map. All this code's the same, except now we're using a split panel. So a split panel, again, is going to take a panel and a map, or a panel or a map and a map. This time we're going to use the panel we printed on the right, and we're going to use the map that we just initialized. And then here is our favorite function, ui.root.clear, and we're going to add that as the root. So you'll just see what happens is we replace what was there with, actually, let me show you what happens if you just do ui.root.clear. It is kind of funny. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear the script. We'll load it back in later. So right now, if I just print the widgets in ui.root, so ui.root is just a panel. So it turns out everything is a panel. ui.root, as I said, so the only widget in the ui.root is a map. And it turns out this map is the default capital M map. Sorry if I'm blowing your mind or breaking open the black box of Earth Engine or the code. Okay, so ui.root.clear, what does that do? Nothing. It clears the screen. It's like tabula rasa. It's like we're babies. We're newborn. We get to do whatever we want now. We can add whatever we want. We can actually just rewrite Earth Engine right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and reload that. So just, sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong one. Okay, so now, so going back to what we were doing before is we cleared the UI root and we're now replacing it with the split panel that we just created. And here we go. So here you have the panel. Here you have the map with the updating points. And look, if you just ship this as is, you have a full Earth Engine functional app. And I think that's pretty good. It'll get what you need to get done, and I think it solves a problem. And so let me just make sure I covered everything. Yeah, so everything else, again, we use the lowercase m, not the capital M. Okay, so last but not least in this part of the examples is styling. So now we gotta make things look pretty. So here's what I did. So you initialize the panel with a style width of 30%. So 30% is kind of like a nice, like, okay, give the panel 30% and give the rest of the map 70%, because they kind of dynamically grow. That's nice. And the user can actually change this if they want. Maybe we can put a max width or something to stop it from going all the way. We add a little border around here. Yeah, borders are nice. I gave the title a font size of 18 pixels and a font weight of 100, because it turns out if you just make anything font weight 100, it just makes it look a little better. And then I added some padding, so this gives it a nice little border, like a nice little, like, yeah, some spacing, and everything isn't so scrunched up together. For the instructions, I gave it a gray color and a padding, again, just to give it some spacing. Pretty much everything else is the same. Yeah, everything else is the same. So that's all I did to do some basic styling, and it works. All right, so if, again, let's say maybe we can let's publish this app. So I press this apps button. I press new app. I type in the name of the app, my NDVI Explorer. I'm going to choose a cloud project. I'm going to choose my basic, my normal project. I'm going to use current contents of editor, but you can also supply a script path. But I just usually use your current contents. And then you have different things. You can like change the gallery stuff. You can have like a public gallery. You can change that. Access restrictions is where you put in your Google group. Oh, logo is a new thing, actually, to show off. So usually when you go to your app, you get like a nice, like, it just says Earth Engine apps. Well, you can actually supply now a image, and you'll see your image and then like on the left side, and then you'll see Earth Engine apps on the right side. So it's kind of cool for like your little branding. And we're just going to publish. And here's my NDVI Explorer. So usually you just click there. It's not ready yet. Okay, fine, that's fine. We'll just wait. It usually takes like about 30 seconds to a minute. We just keep refreshing. Oh, yeah. We had a question? Oh, yeah. You can take questions. It's a great opportunity, and I'm just gonna spam this. Yes, go ahead.
Is it possible to have a custom domain name?
Oh, no, we don't have support for custom domains. If you wanted to, you can go into your domain registry and set like the CNAME record to like the URL. Okay, maybe there's a bug. Eventually, it'll work. We'll revisit it. Oh, wait, it's happening. Yes, success. We successfully published this app. You can visit this app on your computer right now, sufi.earthengine.app/view/myndvi Explorer. So cool, that's how you build apps. But we got more stuff for you because we have more time. Yeah, we're going till 2:15. Okay, cool. Oh, question. Mm-hmm.
One of the ways that we managed to do that was to connect the things with a link that is actually Google Cloud Storage. So
Mm-hmm.
they just click there and then it downloads directly.
Yeah.
Do you have another suggestion?
Oh, can you ask, what was the last thing you just said?
Do you have another suggestion? So for example, you can just, instead of just doing that, like opening your data from a link connected to your Google Cloud Storage,
Uh-huh.
you actually can plug your data that is in your assets with your
Yes. Yes, I actually have a solution for you. Okay, so download URL is something you search in the docs. So if you want to download a feature collection, use get download URL. You can actually specify different formats: CSV, JSON, GeoJSON, KML, etc. If you want to download an image, you can download kind of these. Okay, you only get zipped geotiff for that one. And then there's actually like these like more generic ones, but for the sake of argument, for these two, so what you can do is for this feature or for this image, you can what you'll do is you'll supply this callback function, and that'll have the URL in it. And so then what you do from there is you can then create a label and set and again, the UI.label has a set URL function. So you're going to set, oh gosh, where is this? You're going to set URL to the results of get download URL. So like, yeah, and again, it's just like a generic feature collection or a generic image. So pretty much whatever the resulting image that you want to download, you use get download URL, get that URL, and then use label.set URL, and that will like literally display the link that then the user will download a CSV or whatever. Awesome. Question.
Yeah, when restricting the apps,
Mm-hmm.
do the users you're adding have to have a Gmail, or can it be any?
That's a good question. I don't know the exact details of that. I think Google Group. Are you only allowed to put Gmail accounts in Google Groups? So Google Groups is the. Yes, you do. You do because the user will log in to the app, and you'll have to have a Gmail account as the login email. And then once they log in and we verify, yes, you are part of the Google Group, then you will have access to the app. So therefore, yes, we do need a Gmail account. Yeah.
I think it's a Google account though, not
Oh, Google Gmail. Okay, good point. Like a domain or like you have an organization. So yeah, Google affiliated account. Yeah. Cool. We can keep going. All right, so let's just add some more widgets. So what next? So let's say we wanted to make a text box. And okay, yeah, so this example now masks NDVI. So I wrote a function called mask NDVI, which takes in a value, a number, and actually I have to actually use number. And what it will do is it will set that as a threshold, and then it will map that add layer like that new layer, the mask one. But you can actually specify a value that you want to mask to. So I wrote this function called make text box. So again, everything's a function. That's what I like to do is like I'm doing something. First, just write the function to do it. So what I did was I made a label to say, hey, what's their minimum NDVI? I gave it a stretch vertical. This is kind of funny. This is just to actually make sure these kind of look like they're like in line with each other. I created the text box and I give it the width to 100 pixels. And then I created a panel. And the reason why is I wanted to put these two widgets next to each other. So I created a panel with the label and the text box, and the panel with the layout, UI panel layout flow horizontal. So what this just means is instead of stacking them, we put them horizontally. So that's what that did. And so then I just called make text box to just make the text box. And I think this doesn't do anything because we didn't add any event listeners to it yet. But this is just to start to build more of the UI. So the next one is to add the event listener. So surprise, surprise, the event listener is on change. So I added on change, and then I just used the function I just wrote, mask NDVI. Because what will happen is when this text box changes, it will go through this function. So here's the first thing, reset the layers. So I'm just recomputing the layers every time. So reset the layers, completely clear them out. Essentially take the value that the user put and turn it into a number, because the user can type whatever they want, and we're going to hope that they put in a number, because then you get a string, which is like a text value, and we're going to convert it to a number. And then finally, map.add layer. So we cleared the layers and then added again with the new threshold.
So if you have a question.
Yes,
so
please.
what will happen if they don't pass in a number?
Oh gosh, do you want to know? Okay, I need to run it first. All right. Oh gosh. Layer error parameter value is required. I think I have no idea why that error shows up, but the fix, if you don't mind holding for me, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This is very sweet of you. In these trying times, try catch e. Okay, so you fix this by using a try catch. So what happens is this thing tried to make a number out of this garbage, and just a quick JavaScript lesson. If you want to, if you try to make a number out of garbage, you get nan, which stands for not a number, which is a number, but it's not a number. It's a number that's pretending to be a number, but it's not a number. You can do math on not a numbers. So I can just add two not a numbers together, I think, and it turns out it produces, it's JavaScript. And we're trying to pass in not a number as the value of the threshold, which this says, hey, value is not right. I use a try catch. I think the try catch doesn't work here either, because not a number is valid. I think what we have to do is we have to check if this value is not a number. So like if threshold equals nan. I don't know why I didn't try to do this before. And run it again, and hopefully this catch worked. It's not going to do anything because we're only gonna set the values when. Oh gosh, I forgot to. Oh. Hey, live coding. Thank you. So now, okay, so the values is not a number. Use if conditions, use try catch blocks to kind of stop the user from doing bad things. Okay, yes, I think we've covered the point here. Yes, please.
Do we have a try catch server side?
Oh, I don't know enough.
Number is like
Yeah,
a Earth engine number.
yeah, EE number, yeah.
Go in trouble and
Yes.
test or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Repeat the question.
Yes. Okay. So, is there such a thing as like a try catch for server-side code? For example, if EE number is like invalid.
Normally we fix it with a if, algorithm if.
Yeah. Yeah.
Expecting that
Yeah.
catch whatever shit is going on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
that stuff are going on.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. EE. Yeah. So there's actually a whole conversation here that we didn't cover in this talk, which is like server-side and client-side. So let's just say, and I'm going to try to deviate a little bit from your question to kind of come back to it in a second. What if we were to, instead of the threshold being a real number, we're going to use the server-side EE number. What'll happen? It turns out that something probably broke in a really weird way that this worked. Well, this worked because EE numbers are a thing, and you can pass it into the mask function. Right, that works. But I think the other problem is, what if you wanted to display this number? So let's just say we wanted to we're just going to print the number for a second. So you wanted to set a label to this number, but instead print will even work too. Okay, sorry, I need to use two hands for this. Okay, I'm going to find the text box label. Okay, oh, this is a great example. So, oh, never mind. Yeah, I guess Yeah, the text. Okay, hold on. Let's just kind of keep going in this slide so we can revisit this idea of like server versus client side. But
the answer is it's complicated.
it's complicated. It's complicated and requires a little bit more digging into. Okay, so we're just going to add the text box to the panel. This is what that will do. And there's still a little bit of styling issues to fix there. And so what we did was we created the text box panel earlier. So we create the parking spot for the text box, and then we're going to put the text box later. So we first initialize text box panel, and then we're going to, when in the make text box function, instead of printing instead of printing the text box, we add it to the text box panel, and so now we can now the text box shows up in the right spot. And this is the point where I would probably try to grab the text box and try to set it some sort of values. But for now, we can revisit that. Yeah, we have 8 minutes, so we have plenty of time to go through that in a second. The last thing I wanted to show off here, and this is some coding best practices, is to consolidate all of the widget code in one spot. So earlier we just had widget code like strewn all about. So what I'm going to do is first I just went in and just created the maps at the top. That's just easy. And then for each, we're going to create functions we have functions for each of the main like interactions and the same kind of like the initialization and all that stuff. Then what I did was I created a function called init. And init is going to be called at the very end of the script. And you'll notice that the init function has all of the widget stuff in it. So for example, we have the panel, the label, the UI label, chart panel, text box panel, split panel, etc. It'll clear the root and add the panels. So the init function, it turns out, it can be called as many times as you want. And what it will do is oh gosh, what happened? Okay, everything broke. Never mind. Don't do that. The init function is meant to kind of consolidate all of the widget code in one spot, so that if you're like, where did I initialize that widget? You just know exactly where to go. And you can actually even maybe define like a re-render function or a render function that will maybe like if some things have changed in your app, that you can actually go through and like change all the values that you can call render. So it's like, oh, the user changed a text box and I need to change the color here. Just call render. And render will just walk through all of the widgets and say, hey, what's the value of the text box? What's the value of this checkbox? What's the value of my, whatever thing? And then just re-render, restyle, or recompute all of the stuff in the app. And so then you don't really have to think about like, oh, like if this thing changes, then just do this. Maybe what you can do is make all of the on-change functions the render function, so that whenever anything changes on the screen, you call render, and then you go back and just ask what was the value of all of the different widgets, and then go and update. So you can kind of really think about the software design of your app to kind of help you deal with the fact that all this stuff is just happening all at once. The user's clicking things and changing things. So init function is really nice, and a render function is really good. Okay, so we have a fork here. I can show you how to get server-side numbers to show up in your app, because it turns out that if you just add an EE number to a widget, it's not going to work. It's just going to look terrible. And the other thing to do is I have a little bit of drawing tools. I have like a little thing on drawing tools. So does anyone feel like one is more interesting than the other? I guess one. Okay. Which one? Drawing tools. Okay, you got it. Okay, so the drawing tools example, instead of clicking a point on the map, the idea is you let the user like draw their own points. And here I just forced the user to only select one point, but theoretically this computation can be run on multiple points. And so you can even limit the selections. So if you don't want the user to make polygons but not points, or any number of them, you can do that too. And I will show you how I did that. So if you want your map to have drawing tools, you call map.drawingTools, and then you get the drawing tool. So here I just saved it as a global variable. First thing I did was I set link to true, and the reason why is by default the drawing tools don't change the imports, but when you say set link true, it means that the geometries that you change here will actually be updated in the imports. So keep that in mind if you want that behavior, because if you really need your imports, you know, maybe don't set link true. Here's also where I limited the options to the draw modes to just the point, but you can supply other ones if you want like multiple options. So this is just to get the drawing tools to show up on the screen. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to change that map.onClick to something else. So instead, I use drawingTools.onDraw, and you know, to help to show some documentation. So drawing tools gives you a lot of options. So there's a bunch of event listeners on your drawing tools. So on draw is when the user draws something. On edit is when they drag. Erase is when they delete. When a new layer is added, like for example like that, layer like this config option is called or clicked on. When the layer is removed, selected. So there's a bunch of stuff. It turns out there's enough functionality here that's provided that you can rewrite the entire drawing tools in the code editor, and I've done that. So anyway, just keep that in mind. You have a lot of stuff here. Okay, so what I've done was I've used the onDraw and onEdit. So that means that when the user has drawn something or edited a polygon or geometry, go and do something. So let's take a look at what those are. So the handlers return, they give you the geometry that was edited or added, and the geometry layer itself. And you know, we should probably maybe take a look at the documentation. A geometry layer is kind of like a normal map layer, but it's specifically for the drawing tools. And you can actually get the geometries of that layer using .geometries, and you can even change the color. You can change the color and the and a couple other and the name. You can change a lot of stuff about these layers, and they will update in the UI. So what I've done was I said, okay, we only want this layer, the first one, point, to have one geometry. So if the geometry's length is greater than 1, I'm going to reset the geometries to the geometry that was just created. So I clicked here. This was called geometry. And I'm going to reset that layer to only have that one geometry. But the problem is when you do that, it's going to call the onDraw function again. And then it's going to do that again. And then when the onDraw function is called again, it'll do it again. So it'll actually just keep going in a loop until like this condition is satisfied. So just keep that in mind. You can get into infinite loops if you're not careful. So don't add new geometries on your onDraw, because the onDraw will call again. And then you can like kind of accidentally just add a billion geometries until like, you know, your code editor will break. Okay, so here we're saying if we've created too many geometries, try again. Okay, but now the number of geometries is 1. So instead, we actually want to do something now. We're going to clear the chart panel, just like before, clear the chart, then add the new chart. And I didn't really show you that, yeah, the chart is changing, you know, as I change around, and we only have one geometry. But you know, you change the behavior as you want. And then on edit is a little interesting because every time you drag, on edit is called. And actually, let me just try to get this UI to behave. So I need to get out of. So as long as I'm dragging this point around, I don't know why this is. Huh? Yeah. Okay, well, let's just pretend I'm dragging this around. I don't know. Oh, here it is. Okay, yeah, I got it. I know how to use this. As you're dragging around, it's throwing it's firing so many events, like way too many events that you want to handle. So in order to tell the UI to be a little bit more resilient. Oh, we're over time. Okay, no wonder people are coming in. We use this function. Oh, we use this function called ui.util.debounce. And it will say, okay, within 100 milliseconds, wait, don't call this function. And then wait again, wait. after 100 milliseconds and the user stopped dragging, then do this thing. So anyway, we have these little functionality that you can use to like stop all the event handlers from firing. Okay, unfortunately we're out of time. I'm sorry I couldn't get to the other cool thing. Please talk to me after this workshop, and or come to office hours. I have a few office hour slots. I'm happy to chat with you about UI. I hope you have fun with your apps and have a good day.